We are doing a part 2, folks. I told you guys that we were going to be discussing renting and buying. Hopefully we stay on track, but you never know. This is live and this is how we do it. And none of this is rehearsed. So let's go ahead and try it again. Welcome back.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
I love doing part 2s to my shows because so many people ask a ton of questions. Our show did not air yet, but it's going to be airing next week. So hopefully they'll get it next week and then they'll hear this episode the following week. So they'll dive into a little bit about what we're discussing. Happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you to you as well.
Thank you. Happy Valentine's Day to all of our listeners. So let's talk about the market. Let's talk about renting versus buying and interest rates and payments. I know these are a whole bunch of questions. First of all, what should one person do if they decide they want to buy a house? First time a person calls me, I can tell you what I do as on the realtor end. Somebody calls and says they're interested in purchasing a property. I automatically say, have you talked to a lender yet? And they usually say yes or no, but I think I want to stay around this ballpark. Until I get a definite answer from the lender, I typically don't like to waste my time and take them out because they're really just fishing at that point. And I want to make sure that I'm not wasting my time or anybody else's time. I refer them to a lender and then you guys do your end of it. What is your end look of it? And how do you suggest a realtor refers you that client?
So, okay, perfect. So 2 things. I'll answer the latter part of the question. I think that's the easier part. So for me, what I try to educate agents on in terms of the introduction, you don't want to put yourself in the middle position where you are fighting whether that client wants to use their own lender or whether they want to use the lender that you have a relationship with, because you know that I'll pick up the phone if it's Sunday and I see your name come across the phone. So, and the fact that when you have a trusted relationship versus someone you don't know. So the thing that I think works the best is simply saying, hey, this is fantastic. I'm super happy. Nice to meet you. Are you looking to this house that we're looking at? Are you planning on paying cash or financing? And the second they say financing, say, fantastic. I work with the Michael Jordan of lending. Would you prefer I send you a text or email introduction? And don't leave it up to them to saying, well, just pass it off. I want to do that. And then it's our job. And then on the intake, the very first thing I'm going to do is, hey, hi, how are you? The basics. And essentially what we do is whenever somebody wants to get pre-approved, they're going to give me one of 2 things. Either Becky sent me a bunch of houses and they're around the $450,000 price range. And this is what I'm looking at. The houses seem to have all the qualities and in terms of the characteristics of the house that I'm interested in. And then we say, okay, great. So let's start at that $450,000. We'll use that as your pre-approval amount. How much money did you want to put down? Or if they don't have that 450 number, then we're going to say, well, let's work it backwards. What's absolutely comfortable for you to make in terms of a mortgage payment? How much do you pay in rent now? And they'll say $3,000. Well, for the perfect house, would you go up to $3,500 or is $3,000 a cap? And so you just, try and figure out a little bit of wiggle room so that we know what we're looking at. Now, the cheat sheet is currently where rates are today. And then because you did ask about a market update. So we had a CPI number that came out this morning, which it wasn't bad, but for some reason, the market's not reacting the way it's supposed to. So rates are going to climb a smidge. But in general, a nice round number is think about every 100,000 at $600 a month.
Okay, that's a good thing.
That's a good
Remember this,
tip.
guys. I'm going to write it down too, and I'm going to put it in there. So for every $100,000, it's about $600 a month in payments.
Right. So that's 60 for every 10K as well. Right.
Okay.
And then so that's principal and interest. Now, what I recommend when you're calculating your taxes. So taxes here in Palm Beach County, Broward, and all of Florida, the way that we work the taxes, it's based on whatever the 2022 tax bill was for the seller of the home. Now, in this particular case, right, since we don't know what the taxes is going to be until we find an exact property, I tell people with homesteading that take 1.5% of your purchase price and divide by 12.
I do the same thing.
So I think that number usually works. And then homeowners insurance, we used to use $175 a month, but I'm now telling people, use $300 a month.
Right. Depending on the year of the roof.
Just insurance is a major headache right now.
It really is, because if the house has claims on it, it's next to impossible to even obtain insurance right now.
Yep.
So what type of paperwork does somebody have to give you in order to get a pre-approval letter? So a pre-approval letter, for those of you that don't know, it's a letter that you get that you would supply to the sellers when you go ahead and make an offer on the property. First of all, two-part question. Do you suggest they get a pre-approval prior to making an offer?
I mean, 100%, because I don't know what listing agent or what seller is going to accept your offer without one.
Right.
This is a very competitive market still. So no matter, we've had a little bit of a slowdown, which is great. That means that, you're able to do some of these temporary buy down products and some of the things that we want to do, but it's still very important to have all your ducks in a row. So for me, we don't do, the pre-qualified versus the pre-approved. I'm not interested in just hearing your story, pulling credit, and then sending you out. We're not going to pre-approve you or write a letter until we verify all of the documentation. So the pathway is pretty simple. There's 3 paths. You're either an employee, you're self-employed, or you have passive income, which would be someone who's retired. So it's just one of those 3 mechanisms. And from there are certain documents that are going to prove the story. So, an application for me is just a story. Tell me your story. What do you do? Where are you from? All those different things. And then when we ask the documentation, that's just to essentially prove the story.
Good to know. And then what type of paperwork do they need to submit to you in order to get approved for a loan or to know exactly what they need to do?
Sure. So in general, what I would tell people is to get your paperwork organized prior. If you're an employee, we'll need pay stubs in your most recent W-2. If you're self-employed, typically you want to grab your last 2 years of personal tax returns and business tax returns. The other thing you can do too, oftentimes a lot of people, if they don't have their documentation all organized, have the people who are organized have their contact information. Give us your CPA's number. I'm happy to reach out to and do the legwork for you if that makes your life easier.
What happens if they're self-employed and they haven't filed their taxes for, like, say, 2022 and they're very behind?
So in 2022, you wouldn't be behind. So they're not due yet.
Well, let's say the year before.
So if you haven't filed in 21, that's an issue, right?
Okay.
So because you have to have filed within a certain amount of time. So we follow IRS guidelines in terms of when the, extensions and all of their deadlines are due. So
I'm only asking because I deal with a lot of self-employed people. So these are the questions that they ask. Well, I haven't filed my taxes. We filed extension on extension on extension.
If an extension is allowable still, it's not an issue. It's when you go beyond the allowable dates of the extension, that's an issue. For the self-employed people though, so I think the big thing that we do, and it's a really good consideration in terms of a topic, people often will say, well, I don't qualify, I'm self-employed. Okay, well, that's not true. You may file more in terms of your expenses, and have a lower net income than what you truly make in terms of your revenue. Well, if that's the case, then there's a couple different things we can do. We can take a look at your taxes in what I call reverse engineering. So as you and your CPA prepare 2022, let's take a look at that before you actually hit the file button with the IRS. You can't change the income on a tax return. Your income is exactly what you made. What you can change is how much you're expensing, how much you're deducting for depreciation, for your car, your allowance.
Absolutely.
All the write-offs. Exactly. So maybe I say to you, hey, Becky, in order to qualify, I need your account to remove 10,000 of those expenses, and then you're going to be able to get exactly what you want. Well, that cost of 10,000 might equate to $2,000 in income taxes. So we know that number. Or we could say, hey, let's do a 12-month bank statement program. You're self-employed. Let's take a look at your 12 months of your bank statements. We'll add up all of those deposits, and now we're going to use that as income. Now, the interest rate on that product is higher, but is it more than $2,000? And what is that break even? So if the payment is $100 more per month, all right, well, that's 12 months is $1,200. Within 2 years, it was better to do the $2,000 one-time adjustment because if you do your $10,000 in expenses, as we're talking about, and you remove that for 1 year, the following year, go back to doing whatever you're doing.
Right. How about how long do they have to be self-employed for, or how long do they have to be at their place of business for before they can actually get approved for a loan?
2 great questions. So self-employed, you always need to be self-employed for 2 years. There are workarounds if you have at least 1 full calendar year of a tax return under a corporation. But in general, it's 2 years is the magic number. As an employee, literally an offer letter. Like you could be a student in FAU, graduate, and have an offer letter, haven't even started working, and we can get you a loan.
Wow. How does that work?
So it's just based on, as an employee, the offer is really simple because now we know what you're going to be making. It's a salary, things like that. So income guidelines they vary from every single product we have. So conventional loans, which means Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, they both have their own varying guidelines. FHA has their own guidelines. VA has their own guidelines. Alternative document loans, such as the bank statement loans, each bank has their own guidelines. So it's a lot to kind of get through. Our job is to try and simplify that for you. Tell me your story. I'm going to tell you the best way to do it.
Well, I'm glad you just went right into my next chapter. Let's talk about FHA, conventional, and VA loans.
Okay.
What's the difference between the three?
Ooh, lots of differences. All right.
A ton of differences. I know. As I said, we were going to talk about renting and buying, but for somehow we always get into something else.
Each loan has its own benefit and has its own purpose. When are you trying to do a certain loan? I think it's about, again, and for me, you don't want to fit a client into a box. It's the other way around. You want to listen to everybody's story and figure out what's going to be the best for them. FHA, for example, is a great loan, but it is not the end all loan because there's a private mortgage insurance that never goes away.
Which people might not know what that means. Private mortgage insurance, shorter end of it, I'm sure everyone's heard of PMI insurance. So people just know because they'll be like, what is that exactly?
PMI is when you don't put 20% down on a house. There's a third-party insurance company that is insuring a portion of that loan. So that makes it safer for the lender who's lending the rest of the loan.
And how long does that stay on the mortgage form?
So PMI is a whole different subject, but yes. So this gets complicated.
I know it's just complicated conversations here.
All good. Fire away. I like this stuff. So PMI is something that so depending on the different types of loans. So let's say PMI on a conventional loan, it has you
can get PMI on a conventional loan by not putting 20% down.
Correct.
Okay.
So VA is the only loan that does not have any kind of mortgage insurance. You can put zero down. If you've served and you qualify for a VA loan, it's the best loan. FHA has private mortgage insurance that does not go away unless you put 10% down. If you put 10% down, that private mortgage insurance will go away. It's very rare. Typically, if we're doing an FHA loan, there's a reason. There's usually some sort of credit history. Our debt to income is too high. Our credit score is a little bit lower. The FHA doesn't penalize you the way that the conventional loans do. Like if you have a 640 credit score, you qualify for both, technically speaking. But if you were going to put 5% down on a conventional loan, the interest rate is going to be much higher. Also, the private mortgage insurance is going to be significantly higher. Whereas the FHA loan, the private mortgage insurance is the same amount, whether you have a 740 or whether you have a 620 credit score, it's not going to matter. So they all have their pros and cons. Obviously, it's our job to understand the differences and to educate the client and show them exactly what they're looking for.
Can the interest rate differentiate between conventional, FHA, and VA?
Yes, they're all different. So conventional rates are going to be, and Fannie and Freddie Mac rates are different as well. Not much. It's almost identical, but in general, they move every single day, just like stocks. So for us, if you're asking me to compare an interest rate you got a week ago, well, that's like, all right, well, what was Apple stock last week? That's not what it is today. That's not really how it works. Like you've got to get yourself your updated numbers. So when you're shopping, here's a fun little fact for you. Then what you should be looking at is always what's called your APR. So the APR is the interest rate plus the closing costs rolled into one. You can see an advertised interest rate that has by far the lowest rate on the market. And then you go to take a look at it. And when you read under the fine print, there's 3 discount points with that. Well, that increases your closing costs. So it's just a matter, APR is always the best measure in order to compare, the two institutions, banks, lenders, whatever you're looking at.
And how much money does one need for, let's say, closing costs with their mortgages or a prepaid? Well, what is a prepaid?
Okay. So what I like to explain, I tell people that there are 4 types of what I would call closing costs when you are dealing with any kind of purchase transaction. You're going to have the bank fees, right? So that's your lender. That tends to be a fixed number, usually anywhere from $500 to $1,500 is your normal bank fees. And then you're going to have on top of that, whether or not there are discount points or things like that, that happens based on the rate that you choose. title fees are always going to be about $1,000 is the general number. And then you're looking at title insurance. Title insurance is promulgated by the state of Florida. So it just depends on what your purchase price or your loan amount is. And then that's going to vary depending on the county that we're in. So for example, we're sitting here in Boca, in Palm Beach County. Traditionally, the seller chooses the title company. Therefore, they'll pay that owner's title insurance, which is the most expensive aspect. Then we've got state of Florida fees. So state of Florida fees are going to be based on your loan amount. So there's a recording fee, which is just based on the amount of pages. And then there are two taxes that are 0.002 and 0.0035. Really boring stuff, but the bottom line is it's all based on your loan amount. So the larger the loan amount, the larger your fees are, anticipate your fees being higher. And then lastly, prepaids, as you mentioned, that's just your escrows. It's not a closing cost because it's your property taxes and your homeowner's insurance, but it does get wrapped under the umbrella of closing costs.
What do you think, in your professional opinion, which is the most utilized loan that you guys do?
So I'm going to say that, well, for me personally, I do more conventional loans than anything else.
I see that on my end as well.
Right. So conventional loan so if you qualify for VA loan's fantastic for lots of different reasons. FHA loan, again, it's a means to an end. There's a specific reason we're doing that type of product. Conventional loan is typically what I would prefer to try and qualify an individual for if we can.
And is there a difference? Because usually in the real estate world, a conventional loan for us, when we talk to our clients, is, putting 20% down, usually in most circumstances. Would it be beneficial if they do 25% versus 20%? Is there a big difference?
So right now there is not. And the same token, just so we're on the same page, on a conventional loan, you can put as little as 3% down. So right. A first-time home buyer can put 3% down on a conventional loan. First-time home buyer is defined as someone who has not owned a home in the last 3 years.
Oh, really?
Yes, that's what a first-time home buyer is. It doesn't, you owned a house 5 years ago, you sold it, you've been renting ever since, you're a first-time home buyer under those types of programs. Excellent. You also have, there's Hometown Heroes. There's lots of different programs where you can put zero down. So and we have an FHA product right now where you can put zero down, where it's a first and a second. When we say first and second, there's a first mortgage, that's a FHA loan. And then the second mortgage is at 3.5%. That's even forgivable. So there's a lot of great products. I think the key, what I try to tell people is don't try and look up everything on the internet all at once. It is a lot. I've been doing this for a really long time to understand guidelines, to know every product option you have. I think at the end of the day, it's like anything else. We can go on WebMD and go down that rabbit hole. But right. When I go to a doctor, I go to the doctor that I was recommended for specifically what I want, and I want the best. So I'm going after the best. I'm going to go seek the best, and then I take their counsel.
Okay, so let's talk renting and buying, because that's what I really want to talk about, because I know that people are asking me a ton of questions. They say, should I still rent this year or should I buy? And that is the question I get all the time. Where is the market going? I can tell you these last 2 weeks, we've seen a little bit of a shift. Actually, a couple of our properties that we have on the market right now have gotten a couple, not bidding wars, but we've gotten more bids than we actually thought we were going to get. If houses are renovated, if they have a pool, if the roof is newer, if the windows are newer, those properties are not lasting on the market. And we are actually getting multiple offers again, because there is such an influx of renters right now that are paying astronomical fees that their rent payments are higher than their mortgage payments. And I'm seeing that all the way around. I represent a lot of investors purchasing properties, and, they're charging a lot for rent right now, and good for them. They're making a great return on their investment. But I also see, the renters that are stuck renting that can never buy because they're stuck in that vicious hamster wheel. What is your take on it? Okay.
So first of all, they are not stuck. We're going to turn every single renter into a homeowner. There are very, very few circumstances, and there definitely are. So this is not an all in or nothing. There's very few circumstances in my mind where renting makes sense outside of someone who is traveling all the time, short term, has no intention of living here more than 6 months, or, things like that.
Right.
For the most part, the idea behind real estate And especially in a market where rents are so high, it's the greatest opportunity and safety to buying a home. Because when you buy a house, whether you use a 3% down, right? And let's not forget, almost everywhere you rent, you need first, last, and security deposit. So
Correct.
that amount there is almost equal to typically your 3 or 3.5%. And, depending on the properties, we can also negotiate to have, a seller pay part of the closing costs, things like that. So it's not like you need 20, 30,000 to buy a house. You can buy a house with a lot less than that.
Because right now, let's say the average rent in Boca Raton for a 3-bedroom house for something that's somebody's renovated, it's about $4,000 a month.
Right, which is a lot of money.
A lot of money.
And what's the tax write-off on that rent?
Nothing.
Oh, okay.
Zilch.
Yes. And how much equity did you gain on that?
0.
So imagine you've been renting this house. Let's just say, let's just go COVID. So you've been renting this property in all of 2020, 21, and 22 on the $400,000 house. Let's just use that number. You probably missed out on about $200,000 to $250,000 of equity in 3 years doing absolutely nothing.
That's right.
And then what you do is that if you need to sell, right? So I'm a firm believer that you should never sell real estate ever, 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 unless you have a type of income that you're not able to build your next down payment for your next home when you're ready to do that. So oftentimes we'll see people sell their home in order to purchase their next home, right? They'll take the proceeds from this property to buy something else. Totally cool. I get it. It is what it is. You got to do that. But this is how you create generational wealth. And a renter starts with their first home. You just start with your first home. You have to live in the house for 1 year, right? That's a whole general idea. And then you can go out. So that's the guidelines. You live in a house for a year, you can buy your next house as a primary residence. So we buy, you find a home that you like, 300,000, 200,000, 400,000, doesn't matter what the purchase price is. Mm-hmm. And you live in the house for a year, and then you start finding your next property. And then you find a renter to take over the basically, and because our rental amounts are so expensive, you're going to make profit.
Right.
I bought an investment condo. I think I closed, I don't know, I guess it was September of, 23, so September 21. I think my profit on that property is probably $800 or $900 a month that I'm making in profit.
Wow.
And that's just, it's a $200,000 condo. It's just that rents are so crazy here.
They are very crazy here. So I work with a ton of investors, and I have gotten words of wisdom, and you literally just spoke my language. They don't sell their real estate, and this is going to be in their family forever. And what they do is when they want to buy another property, if there is a mortgage on that property, they refinance, they pull money out of another property, and they use that money to put down on another property. And that's how they keep going and going in real estate and building their portfolio.
They are using leverage.
Yes.
So you leverage the equity of a home that you did not do anything to gain. The key is taking that money out in order to continuously increase your assets. So essentially, it's like gambling. Like imagine you go to a casino and your very first bet, you win $500. Put whatever money that you had in your pocket that you brought there, put that in the other pocket. And now the rest of the night, you're only gambling with that $500 you won.
Right.
It's house money. So that's the same general concept. The concept is as you build equity, use this equity to increase your worth and to, your portfolio. And then you can sell that stuff later on if you want to, when you want to retire. If you don't want to be involved in managing the properties, use a property manager. I literally have seen this particular unit that I own. I've seen it once with my agent when she found it for me. And
you've had a tenant in there consistently since then?
Yep, 100%.
Same tenant?
No, the tenant changed. But my point is that it wasn't ever, the management company did everything.
That's awesome.
They were fantastic. And I literally haven't done anything. Anything breaks, I don't get any phone calls. Like being a property owner doesn't mean that being a landlord, I should say, doesn't mean that you have to be involved in the everyday aspect. You
can be as involved or uninvolved as you want.
Your choice, right? I pay a fee for that. And for me, I want to stick to what I'm good at, which is doing mortgages, not being a landlord.
and investing your money wisely.
Correct.
So what would you do if somebody says, I'm going to wait for the interest rates to drop back down to like 2%?
Awesome. Love it. So fantastic question. That, and as well as I'm waiting for the market to crash.
Yes.
Okay, in
Two
terms
things
of
that I
values.
hear nonstop.
So I hear them nonstop as well. And I say, please, 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 please. It is the worst thing to say or to think. Here's what happens. Let's take a basic look at supply and demand and how it works. Okay. When interest rates rise, demand slows down. That means that allows supply to pick up, right? That's why that's why sellers are negotiating a little bit. And guess what happens? We just hit a 9-month high in terms of mortgage applications in the past few weeks. And this is exactly why your listings have had this bidding war all of a sudden. Okay.
Right.
So all of a sudden that means demand is flying. So when demand starts to fly, now all of a sudden sellers prices go back up, and then sellers don't give us concessions. When interest rates start to drop, you will have a major influx of people all trying to do the same thing. And we're back to 2021 again.
Exactly.
So yes, is the house, are interest rates a little bit higher, and is the mortgage payment going to be a little bit higher in what you buy this year? Absolutely. Don't worry. We're going to refinance as the rates come back down over the next couple of years. But if you sit on the sideline, you're going to miss the equity. If you sit on the sideline, when you go back in, you're going to be trying to buy a turkey the day before Thanksgiving, just like everyone else, and you're going to get stuck with a frozen one.
Yeah.
It's just not the same thing, right? And same thing with people who say the market is going to crash. Where? Maybe in North Dakota, I don't know if you have listeners in North Dakota, but for in South Florida, we've got 1,000 people that are moving here every single day. We are a very pro-business state, and we have sunshine year round.
I know.
It's just not the same market. Our market is not going to crash down here. The loans that we are making are all qualified loans. There is no such thing as what we were doing in 05, 06, and 07. So you're not going to see that kind of crash. The only thing that you're going to see, if anything at all, are the listings that are throwing out some ridiculously high number. Those listings will come back down to earth. But in terms of, I still have yet to have anyone tell me that a house in the community sold for less than the last sale. That's when values have gone down. When you start to say, when you see a house that you're closing on at 500,000 and the previous sale was 550, now all of a sudden we can talk about a downward trajectory, but that has not happened. And that's not what's happening. The guy who was asking 800 for his house is now getting realistic.
I couldn't agree with you more. Seriously. I hear it all the time from clients. I'm looking at realtor.com and I keep seeing price drop and price up. I'm like, because they were not asking the exact amount of money. They thought they were still going to win the lottery by putting it on the market with whatever they thought they felt they were going to get with it. And now they're coming back to reality of where they should actually be priced. And if they price it right from the get-go, their house would have already been gone.
And a big part of that too is that this is why it is so important to use a professional real estate agent. Using a professional is going to, you're doing all that comp search beforehand. And it's not just about throwing something against the wall and hoping that it sticks. And oftentimes, sometimes it's about having hard conversations too and saying, I'm happy to, because it's not a good look for you either. If you list my house for $200,000 over what it's worth, it doesn't make either of us look good if it just sits there.
Right.
Right. So the point is we should be trying to sell a house as quickly as possible for top dollar. And both of those things can be achieved by working together. Absolutely.
I couldn't agree with you more. Another question I just had for you. Hold on one second, because it just drew a blank. Okay. So back, let's say 2021. Yeah, I would say 2021, 2022. I got from buyers or from renters that were looking to buy. Oh my gosh, if only my bids would win. I've presented 15 offers and none of them are winning. Well, folks, this is your time. But now it's the interest rates are too high. The market's going to crash. I keep hearing it all the way around the 360. And that's why I said it's almost like a hamster wheel for these renters to be dishing out all this money. And they're thinking the market's going to crash. So, for my people that are renting that have questions about it, my first question is, how long have you been renting for? Usually it's 2 years. Sometimes it's 3 years. It's never been like that year mark, right? Because they've been waiting for the market to change or shift. They're waiting for not so many deals to be on the market. They're always waiting for like that perfect market, which to me, I don't really believe there is a perfect market. I feel like if you need to buy a house, now is the time you need to buy a house. I do not feel like renting is the answer. I do feel like buying real estate is the answer and not renting. The other thing is I feel that with them, they get stuck in the rental where they wind up paying, let's say $120,000 over the last couple of years in renting. And I give them this scenario. If you would have bought this house, say the height of the market, you deduct $120,000 off of it, you're still paying less than what the actual values of the properties are even right now. I don't feel that values have decreased $120,000 for like, let's say the $800,000 range. So that's just where I'm at with my clients. And that's why I said, I feel like they're almost on that hamster wheel, always chasing that perfect market when there's not. This is the perfect market. Now is the perfect market.
Timing a market is an impossibility no matter what market we're talking about. And there's a seller who's never going to get top dollar. They're sitting, they're holding, they're waiting. And then all of a sudden they waited too long, right? And then there's a buyer who bought too late or bought too early. It literally, you can't time it, just like stocks. We have no idea. You've just got to stick to your fundamentals. That's what a financial advisor is going to tell you. And it's the same thing that we as real estate professionals should be saying as well. Listen, at the end of the day, if you think you don't want to live in South Florida, okay, go ahead, rent for a year. That part I understand. Figure out where you like, what area you like.
Exactly.
But don't forget, you are paying someone else's mortgage when you are renting. You're letting me make money. You're letting the landlord make money in terms of gaining equity, because as market factors happen and I gain equity in a property, you're putting money in my pocket instead of your pocket.
So let me ask you the question then. Is now a good time to buy? Now
is a fantastic time to buy.
Would you invest your own money in the market today?
Sure. 100%.
And I would as well. And I'm going to leave you guys with that. So thank you so much. Where can they find you again if they want to get a mortgage quote from you, or to get pre-approved, or to find out how are you only licensed in the state of Florida? No,
we're licensed like 14 states. So a bunch of states.
Okay. So if you guys live out of state, call him and he'll tell you whether or not he's licensed in that state. And if not, I'm sure he can assist you with somebody that he knows in another state to help you get pre-approved for a loan.
Yeah, just go on our website, choicemortgage.com. So that's CHOICE, mortgage all spelled out.com. My name is Emmanuel St. Germain.
Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate your wealth of information.
Thank you for having me, Becky.